All right, guys, I'd like to welcome you to the Startup Guides Speaker Series. This is a brand new series, and this channel is really dedicated to helping first-time entrepreneurs navigate the roller coaster of entrepreneurial life. Today's guest is a former student of mine and friend, Austin Beveridge, and Austin's going to talk a little bit about his journey. Before we get started, I've got an exciting announcement. So as of tomorrow, I'm going to be launching a learning management system with courses and downloads specifically for entrepreneurs and small businesses. So I'll just kind of scroll down here so you can go to courses.startupguides.co. We've got all sorts of fantastic resources. For example, critical terminology for the entrepreneur. This is totally free. My college student startup guide. We're going to have a course on Facebook marketing. And the big one is that we're going to have a course specifically designed for small business owners, startups and consultants. So I actually launched the first digital marketing course at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the MBA program. One of the things I found as I was studying small businesses and startups this year is that obviously they needed to have a presence like never before online. So I've been designing this course for the last couple of months. The course is going to be $3.99, but I'm actually rolling it tomorrow for $1.99. So that's a great course. We're already getting amazing feedback on it. So I'd encourage you to check that out. That'll be available at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time for $1.99. Again, the URL is courses.startupguides.co. All right, so let's go to our guest. A good friend of mine. I was going to do a round of applause. I guess that wouldn't make a lot of sense because we can't hear people. So Austin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, G. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. So what part of the world or country are you in? Because whenever I talk to Austin, it'll be like, I'm like, where are you? Cleveland. Where are you? Bangkok. And so it's always an interesting story. And Austin's kind of a digital nomad, which we'll talk about a little bit. So tell us a little bit about where you're at now and your travels. Actually,
Sure.
Check that. Let's talk about your background, and then we can kind of get into your travels.
Sure. So my background, grew up in Wisconsin, went to University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, really thought I was going to be an accounting major. I really liked the structure, and I really liked how all the rules kind of played together. My superpower was really seeing all the rules and figuring out ways around them, which as accountants know, that's probably not the way to do that. So quickly shifted from accounting over to marketing. I found that marketing kind of gave me the ability to kind of think through problems in a different light. Then took a course in entrepreneurship and started my own business. Learned a lot about how to operate a business, how to find the right people, how to prospect, find the right clients. Sometimes you have to fire the clients because they don't fit what you're looking for. Ended up pivoting, then joining Direct Supply, where I worked as an intern and then another internship, and then got a full-time role. Then decided, hey, corporate might not be right for me, so I'll try startup route again. Joined an agency in San Francisco, worked there for a few months, and then joined Bolt, which is my latest company, and been here for about a year and a half now. So
okay, so and this is in the last how many years?
Last 3 years now.
Okay. So obviously you learned a ton while you were in school. Let's go back to some of those lessons that entrepreneurs can learn. I mean, whether they're could be high school, but college or corporate refugees. What do you say were the big lessons like outside of the classroom that were just aha moments for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I think a lot of people try to position it as like, here are all the benefits of my product, but people don't care what the benefits are. What they want to know is, what does your product do that nobody else can do for me, and how is that going to benefit me in the long run? It's not, oh, well, we have this feature and this feature does X, Y, Z. It's like, okay, well, we have this feature. Here's what it means for you, and here's what it means for you or your business, right?
Okay.
I think a lot of people focus on the feature and not what the actual benefit is.
Right. Okay.
think follow up to that is, I think, perseverance. I think you get told no a lot, and I think getting told no is actually the right thing to do. If you get told yes a lot, I think you kind of get soft. What I mean by that is you get told yes and yes and yes and yes and yes, and you think it's so easy. But the reality is when you get told no, you have to learn and you have to adapt, and you have to adapt your skill set so that eventually you can get that yes you're looking for.
Yeah, I think, what I'll say about Austin, I mean, I've worked with some very special students in the last 20 years, and that includes MBA students at UW-Madison and entrepreneurship students here, is the ones that quote unquote succeed. And I'm not talking about money, but the ones that are happiest in their careers, that tend to be the most fulfilled, they get pushed hard internally, right? Because, we might say, hey, you need to go develop this brand, talk to an intellectual property attorney, set up a landing page. We'll give you $1,000 on an office space, and then come back in a week. And which is just mind blowing for an average student. But there's students like Austin that just completely step up to the plate. And those people are, just fantastic to work with. And obviously you need a certain amount of creativity and perseverance, like you talked about. So let's talk about the digital nomad lifestyle. So you, Brandon Fong, Sam Lepak, Evan Laird, right? So there was basically a cohort of you guys that graduated at the same time, and I'd never seen anything about it. So let's talk about the digital nomad lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. It gives you the opportunity and the flexibility to kind of play both coasts. So I've worked on the East Coast, I've worked on the West Coast. I've traveled basically all 50 states now with my fiance. So we visited everything except for Hawaii and Alaska. We basically just pick a route, pick an endpoint, and then just drive there and just find all the different opportunities in between to do stuff. So we drove to New York City, we drove to Maine, we drove down the coast, we went over to Cape Cod, came back to Wisconsin. Now we just finished up a road trip we're finishing up in the next week. We drove out to North Carolina, down to Georgia and Alabama and Florida and Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas.
Right.
And then now we have another opportunity to go to Hawaii for a couple of months. So right. I think when companies give you the ability and freedom to work kind of where you want, when you want, I think it allows you to just live a more fulfilled and happier life because you're just experiencing and living. I think a lot of people, they get to the end of their life and they realize, shit, well, I just worked my whole life and I never got to see or do anything. And now they figure, okay, well, I'm going to spend all this money on travel and all these cruises. But the reality is when you reach that point, it's already too late. You can't go skydiving. Well, you can, but the risk is so high. You can't do all of these crazy things. And so I just flipped the whole thing and I said, hey, why don't we just travel and work on the road and then do all those things now? Like, sure, it's going to cost more money and I could be saving for whatever I want down the line, but tomorrow I could get hit by a bus and what would it matter, right? So it's kind of like you just got to live your life, safely, but within your means. So.
I don't know if I'd say you live yours safely. I would say borderline responsibly. So I want to hit this digital nomad piece because, Sam Lepak just wrote a book on it. He's going to kill me for not remembering it. But you can go out to LinkedIn and type Sam Lepak. You'll find it. So the concept, why don't you talk about the concept behind a digital nomad? So this lifestyle, if you guys aren't familiar with Tim Ferriss, check him out. Check out his podcast. And he wrote the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which really kind of kicked off this lifestyle. So beyond your own travels, talk about this lifestyle of a digital nomad and what the concept behind that is.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that doesn't necessarily hold people back, but they're stuck in a place. And what I mean by that is like they're stuck at a job that requires you come into the office, that requires you're in person. Now, don't get me wrong, being in an office has a certain level of cohesiveness or bond to it, right? Because everybody's there and everybody's doing the same thing. I think what digital nomad allows you to do, though, is it allows you to basically leverage your time zones. So for me, I have people that work on the East Coast and I have people that work on the West Coast. Well, when I'm working in the middle of the country, that means I can get up earlier and work with the people on the East Coast. I can stay up later and work with the people on the West Coast. I think digital nomad allows you to essentially work wherever you want, whenever you want, so long as you're getting work done during your normal work hours. And so I think it's just a super unique opportunity for people to get outside of their traditional mundane 9 to 5 and working in the office, go and try and do new things in different places around the world.
Yeah, I think Yeah, the big thing is it is literally anywhere, right? So, I mean, what I find the people that are doing the digital nomad style, I mean, lifestyle, they're usually in the 20s, 30s. They're probably not in their 50s and 60s, but that can change, like mid-career people, right? Midlife crisis. Not that I ever had one of those. Is it's laptop, right? Laptop and go find a job, or find a job, grab a laptop and go. Usually one-way tickets, no plans on the back end, and yeah, they just go, right? So, I think, a couple of students, Fong and Lee Pack and Laird, went to Europe. And why don't you talk about where you went? Because you didn't go to Cincinnati. You went by yourself. Talk about where you went and what that experience was like.
Yeah, so I wasn't working at the time, but I did, as soon as I took and graduated from college, I took a little bit of a gap to go over to Thailand. So I landed into Bangkok with a one-way ticket, didn't know where I was going to go, what I was going to do, and met a couple of cool people along the way, Gino and Jan, early on, and we just kind of traveled. We just kind of went to a couple of different places. We went to the most remote villages in Thailand. We went to some of the mountains. We went to a bunch of different things. And ironically, while we were climbing a mountain, there was this tree. And at the tree, it's the tree of love is what it's called. And so you're supposed to buy a charm. And if you buy the charm, you find out who your true love's going to be, right? So I buy the charm, put it on the tree. I'm thinking nothing about it. I dated my girlfriend then at the time, Ayana, for just over 3 years at the time.
To note, guys, that Ayana was not with us.
Yeah, right.
Okay. That's a key point. All right.
So anyways, bought the charm, put it on the tree, and literally within 5 minutes, we just kind of looked over at each other and just like, holy cow, like, do you feel this moment of peace? And I just said, hey, like, I realized I had planned this whole trip for three-ish months or 4 months, and I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. But in that moment, all I knew was that I wanted to marry Ayana. So in the middle of Thailand, in the middle of the backcountry, book a ticket, one-way flight back to the U.S., take a couple of trains, couple of boats, an airplane ride, and less than 24 hours later, had a ring on the ground, a suit in hand, and went and proposed. Had her parents on it, and there we were, off to the races. So.
Yeah, so you had kind of your walkabout, your moment of clarity. It didn't take that long. Austin kind of moves quickly. He's kind of a man after my own heart, because I tend to do the same thing, sometimes to a fault. But all right, so let's, we talked about graduating. You work for Direct Supply, which is a provider of products and services to long-term care, right? And then you kind of realized, look, great company, great people, but you wanted something that was a little bit faster paced. And as I recall, we had the conversation and I said, get a one-way ticket. I'm not taking the credit because you did the execution, but get a one-way ticket to San Francisco. I mean, I think you recall that conversation, right? Now, you didn't exactly get a one-way ticket. What did you do?
Oh, we took a road trip. So we took a 3-month, 2-month sabbatical to try to drive from Wisconsin out there and saw the whole Southwest of the United States. So I think the biggest takeaway that I have from that was, if you're going to do something, you might as well kind of string it out. You don't have very many opportunities to see the world, so you might as well leverage it while you can. We knew where the destination was, but we didn't know what was going to be in between. And so took off in a car and drove and got there and kind of played it by ear, I guess.
Yeah, I got pictures, weird pictures. I'm like, oh, it's Route 66 and, standing next to the tallest statue, whatever, in the U.S. and Golden Gate Bridge. And I'm like, well, you definitely listened. I just didn't take the route that I thought he would. So, all right. So you get to San Francisco, no job, correct?
Oh, so that's funny. So the moment I left, I actually started putting my resume out there. So I reached out to a bunch of different people. I think the one thing that I did, which was kind of unique, was I'd find the companies I wanted to work at, but then I'd also find all the people that worked at all the companies I wanted to work at. And then I'd send them DMs on LinkedIn.
Okay, DMs for anybody that's, older than probably 50. Explain what the DM is.
It's a direct message. So you find somebody on LinkedIn, you connect with them. If they're a second or third connection, you send them a personalized note like, hey, I saw what your company's doing. I think it's super interesting. We'd love to talk about it. And I think what I did, which was unique, was instead of asking for a job, I just kind of asked like, hey, what do you think about this company? What is it that you guys do? So it's that time old, like, ask for advice, you get money, you ask for money, you get advice. And that really played true. So I started interviewing on the road. And then I think we were in Las Vegas, and I actually had then received an offer. So we kind of celebrated in Las Vegas for a little bit. But yeah, so.
Okay, so you get your first job out there. Why don't you talk a little bit, because that company had a very interesting business model, right? So you don't have to name names. Just kind of talk a little bit about their business model.
Yeah, so it's super interesting. So their core competency was PR. So PR is press releases, it's media briefings, it's essentially preparing executives to go out on talking road shows, get the company coverage, et cetera, right? But what was interesting about it is that they had then started to do some social and paid media. So they had branched out into other forms of marketing, but then they also had this separate subsegment to their business where they would actually invest in the startups. So instead of taking full cash, they would also sometimes take equity in startups. And so what that does is aligns your values, right? You're getting cash plus you're getting equity. So naturally then I want to succeed. So it was kind of this unique business model of not only PR, but also marketing, and then also aligning the interests of the stakeholders with the companies who are supporting them.
Okay, so from a business model standpoint, I mean, one of the things we always talk about is don't rely on one stream of revenue when you're starting out, because usually it's fatal. I shouldn't say usually. We definitely don't want to rely on an advertising model, but that's for another day. So one of the clever things this company did is they were cash flowing. They had consistent revenue streams in the short run, medium run, but then they also had potential for a long-term payout. They were almost a PR agency meets angel investment group, right?
Yeah, and it was always capital. So either it's human capital or it's investment capital, right? So it's putting in your time. I think the biggest unique differentiator was they would partner with different VC firms, and instead of pitching it as like PR as a service, it's more like educating founders, whether at a series C, seed round, right? You don't necessarily need an agency yet. And so if you build those relationships with founders before they even need you, then when they're coming to the time when they do need you, now they already have that connection. So it's a super unique way to not only get long-term interest, but also establish long-term relationships with people before they actually need your product. So it's a complete pipeline.
All right, cool. So let's talk a little bit about Bolt. I'm going to see if I can actually pull them up here. Why don't you let's kind of talk a little bit about the quote unquote history, because there isn't much history, where they're at now, and then, we can kind of, go from there.
Sure. So Ryan started Bolt 2014. He worked in Stanford. He was in Stanford's Bitcoin club. So he founded the Bitcoin club there. He worked on a lot of people's websites, predominantly e-commerce. And he saw this huge gap in the marketplace, which was the default checkout. So checkout's one of the most complicated pieces of software that somebody might need to build. So typically what somebody will do is they'll launch the default checkout, right? So you have the default checkout from Magento, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, et cetera. And so what Bolt and Ryan did was essentially take apart that experience and make it as streamlined as possible. So there's less fields, less clicks, less everything. But the secret sauce then is the next time that they shop, because the next time they shop, they get a single click experience across any site in the Bolt network. And what that allows you to do then is, regardless of the platform, meaning BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Magento, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, you have access to single-click shoppers. And so the secret sauce then is, how do we take people who have predominantly had a one-click experience on sites like Walmart, Amazon, Target, where they have an account, and fill that up to the rest of the internet?
Okay, so just obviously you're a fast talker, kind of like I am. Right. So let's kind of bring this down to a world. Let's say you're whatever mid-sized firm, and you haven't done e-com before, and you've got customers that are starting to buy on Amazon, Walmart.com, and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to really get into this fast, and let's say we're going to go direct. So we come to you guys typically with an e-com site, and then just talk about kind of the steps of the service that you guys provide.
Sure. So you're spinning up an e-commerce site. You're going to choose
our own e-commerce site, right? Okay.
You're going to first select an e-commerce platform or provider, which is going to be something like a BigCommerce, a WooCommerce, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, et cetera. That's going to be the default. If you compare it, it's kind of like the body of a car, right? It's all the framework that you need to assemble a car.
Mhm.
And so it gives you essentially where you can build your site. It gives you all the platforms. It gives you a theme. It helps you build that site.
Gotcha.
Then you're going to select a payments gateway, and a payments gateway is going to be the person that collects and remits payment. So a person enters their credit card, I can receive that payment and then transmit the payment. Then on the back end, after you've received that payment, you want to have something that protects you from fraud. The reason why you want to have that is because there's all types of different kinds of fraud. There's reshipping fraud, there's chargeback fraud, et cetera. It doesn't matter. There's a variety of different types of fraud. And so you want a tool that essentially protects the bottom line and top line of that business so that every legitimate order gets passed through.
Gotcha.
So now you've established that baseline set, right?
Yep.
And now you're looking for efficiencies or you're looking for improvements. What Bolt does is essentially replace the default checkout from a BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, et cetera. It can replace your payment processor. So if you want, or if you're not happy with your payment processor, you can use a payment processor by Bolt.
Mhm.
And then on the back end, then from fraud indemnification, fraud chargebacks, we represent those individuals in their cases and help protect them against fraud. The reason why we're able to protect people against fraud in a more informed manner is because we have access to all that behavioral data and the payment data, right? So traditionally you have 3 different people that I just outlined before, and none of those systems talk to each other. They kind of operate in their own silos. And what Bolt, because it unites that whole system, you have a much more holistic picture of that shopper. And so you're able to not only convert more shoppers, but protect your bottom and top line from those fraudulent transactions.
Okay. Awesome. As you can tell, Austin is a marketer. So he's definitely repping the brand. He's got the value prop. So let's talk about the here and now, because there's, we've gone from startup to rocket ship pretty recently. So let's talk about, in case Ryan's listening here, he'll like this. Let's talk about the rocket ship called Bolt.
Sure. So started off out of the gates in 2018 with a $22 million Series A. Scaled up from roughly 20 people to 50 people, then raised a $68 million Series B. Again, grew from the 50-ish to over 100 individuals 2019. Then we just closed Series C1 with an additional 50 million led from Lawrence Tosi over at previously Airbnb. And so it's kind of been this rocket trajectory, but funding isn't the true story, right? Funding is only one half of the story. You don't get funding unless you have customers, right? And so now
it's not always true, and that's
not always true.
So yeah,
not always true. But just in the past couple of weeks, we signed Forever 21. So we now replace the default checkout on Forever 21, so you can browse their site. We signed a deal with ABG, which is the largest brand group in the entire world. So they own stores like Nautica, Brooks Brothers, Juicy Couture, and other name brands. And so those are kind of some of the latest innovations at Bolt, right? It's signing partnerships with strategic partners who align with both of our interests.
Right.
ABG, there's a blog post, if you read it on our site, bolt.com, you'll see it. Essentially, ABG operates this portfolio of brand groups. The challenge is that all of those brand groups operate on different platforms, right? Okay. So some of them are on BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Magento, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And there was no partner from a technology standpoint that can unite all of those tech stacks. And so what Bolt does is then allow ABG to say, no matter where this shopper is interacting with our digital portfolios online, if they've shopped once, they can get a one-click checkout on any of our sites.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. All right, so let's kind of go back to, we've actually got some high schools. We're going to be rolling out this intro to digital marketing course to a couple of high schools. Shout out to Barrington here. So what advice would you give high school entrepreneurs if you could go back in time and tell yourself something? What would you tell yourself?
It's so funny you asked that, because I kind of went through it with my own brother. So he started his own pen manufacturing, Madison Pen and Woodworks.
Okay.
He launched his own pen manufacturing company. So he bought a lathe and he bought all these materials and he bought all the things that he wanted to make pens, right? He just had a passion for making pens and he wanted to get them out in the world.
Right.
I think the biggest piece of advice that I would have for somebody is just start small, right? I think a lot of people think you need all the latest technology, that you need all the latest capital, you need all this money to do things. But I think the biggest thing is not necessarily getting the right tools up front. It's just getting whatever it is that you're going to do down. Like
Right.
find out whatever it is that you want to do and then go do it and
Right.
get a lot of feedback too. Like don't just assume that like you're going to build it and people are going to come. Like go find people that want it. And then if they say, yeah, I want it, well then make sure they actually want it and get them to put $1 down.
Right.
The thing is, people will tell you that they want it because they don't want to hurt your feelings. But it comes down to, will they actually pay for it?
Right.
And that's where you know if you have something or not, if people actually pay for what you've made. So
Right.
Brooks, going back to that example, Brooks made a couple of pens, started selling them at school, right? So he's selling it to his high school students. You know, I'm sure professors and teachers heard about it and now they want some. So now he knows, okay, well now not only do students want it, okay, some of my professors and teachers want it as well. And so he knew he had a market. So I think it's just find out whatever it is that excites you. Go find people who like what it is that you do.
Right.
See if they'll buy one up front. And then if they will, okay, then go make a couple. And then if they buy those, then make a couple more. Don't go make 100 of them and then try to sell them and then realize, okay, we just wasted all this time on something that nobody wants.
Right.
And I would say that's the biggest thing that I learned is there's a lot of ideas out there, but really what it comes down to is, do people care about your ideas and will they pay for it?
Right.
I think the single takeaway from what I've learned.
Yeah, I think, gosh, I couldn't have said it better myself when I teach it. I think, you know, I see, you know, one of the biggest challenges with startups, and I don't like the word failure, but the reason that they shut down is they'll say, oh, it's the money. And usually it's not the money. Usually it's that they didn't do discovery and they didn't find a pain point. They didn't come up with a good product. They didn't figure out a way to get to the customer. They didn't determine if the customer would pay for it. So those are usually the problems. It's not because they ran out of money. I mean, that's, you know, I won't, you know, say the word I was thinking of, but it's usually not true.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now the high school self, now you could go back to the college self or the university self. What would you tell Austin?
This is going to be very counterproductive or very cliche, but I think I spent so much time trying to perfect everything. What I mean by that is, you know, I tried my hardest to get an A. And when I tried to get an A, I tried to get 100%. And I got so upset when I couldn't get something that was close to 100%, or I couldn't get the A, or I couldn't get whatever. I graduated college with 2 B pluses and it didn't matter, right? Like at the end of the day, all they care about is that you got the degree and you did proficiently well and you have the skill set that's going to meet their needs. I think what I would tell myself is stop focusing so much on what it is that you're learning and start focusing on like who you're around. I think one of the things that I realized early on with the startup, with CEO specifically at Whitewater, was there's a lot of people that have a lot of good ideas.
Right.
And I think those connections are what's valuable. I think a lot of people focus on just getting the grades, but I think the majority of the value of college is actually who you meet, not necessarily what they do. Because you have no idea what people are going to do or who they're from or who their parents are, or you have no idea. And I think I just wish that freshman year I would have gone out and joined more clubs, done more things, and spent less time like sitting in the classroom and doing all those.
Yeah, I think, you know, the other example is, so I manage a startup accelerator with, you know, a couple of other people here. The opportunities, if you have the opportunity to be in an accelerator, learning about intellectual property, learning about funding, learning about hiring people, learning about firing people, learning about bootstrap marketing, the skills that you learn, I would put the students coming out of accelerators virtually anywhere, I would stack them up over, you know, against a lot of MBAs, because typically, and I'm not devaluing MBAs, but typically what happens is those folks become functional experts, but they're not generalists, right? So I wrote this book, The Corporate Refugee Startup Guide, and one of the challenges is if you're mid-career, you're a marketing, you know, you're specialized in marketing, you're specialized in finance, ops, whatever, and you've got these blinders on and you don't know what you don't know, and you think you're going to be a really good entrepreneur, which you might be, but the ones that are successful, they've got some specialization, they know the industry, they know the pain point, they've come up with solution, but they've identified these gaps and they surround themselves with those people that can make them successful as well. All right, so we're at the present time now, and talk to us, you know, let's say you've graduated, right? You've been out of school for a couple of years. What kind of if you had a chance to sit back now and be objective and say, hey, Austin, you really need to think about X, what would X be?
You know, I think the biggest thing that I've done that's been a challenge is spending time with the right people in the right places. And what I mean by that is naturally I like to work. It's just what I like to do. You know, it's something that I'm not necessarily good at, but I kind of understand.
Right.
And I think what that's done is it's taken a lot of time away from people that I probably should have spent. You know, I wish I would have spent more time with my fiance. I wish I would have done a lot more things with her and try to spend more time with her. I think a lot of my focus has always been on like getting the thing done the fastest. And I think that's what makes me really good at my job.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I think, you know, what I try to do is if somebody has a request, I'm gonna get that request done to the best of my ability as fast as I can. But I think what that does is it causes a lot of internal stress with other people around you. Right. And I think there is this dichotomy of, do I choose the personal life or do I choose the professional life? And I think I haven't quite mastered that balance, but I'm trying to get there, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if you want me to go into my job today, but.
So we've got about a minute. So you can talk about the job and then give just a plug for Bolt.
Sure.
I'll pull up the URL so that they can learn a little bit about you, check up jobs, things like that. So yeah, let's talk about the here and now.
Sure. So what I do at Bolt is essentially manage all of our agencies. So our creative agency, paid media agency, right. Our dev agency, et cetera. So I make sure that any request that comes through from any individual across the organization gets processed through in a timely manner. Okay. Also on our social media and our email program as well. So I kind of manage and touch a bunch of different things. Okay. And then as for Bolt, I think if you're a business who is selling online, you've established your brand, you're looking for new ways to reach new customers, or you're looking for ways to convert more customers, or you're looking for ways to start protecting yourself against fraud. You know, you have your business, it's already started up, you're doing a couple of $1 million in sales a year, and you're just trying to take it to the next level. I think that's where Bolt steps in. It's really helping you convert more of your customers because, you know, like I said, because it has less fields and clicks, that's not really the secret sauce. The secret sauce is that they can have a one-click experience across any shop, any platform in the network. Right. And what allows you to do that is to give shoppers an experience that they can only ever have on Amazon on your site. Right. So you're really freed from those technological limitations, and you have that same technological advantage that Amazon had.
Right.
For years.
Well, I think you did an amazing job of talking about the Bolt successes. Shout out to HR. Maybe it's bonus time, a little extra stock. I'm going to get strung up for saying that, but awesome having you on the show. Austin and I planned the show about 2 hours ago, but that's the way we roll, right?
That's right.
So again, if you want to check out Bolt, go ahead, and it's bolt.com. I've got these courses coming out for entrepreneurs tomorrow, and there's all sorts of free resources. Actually, entrepreneurs, small businesses, startups really excited to bring those courses to you to help not just survive, but as I talk about in my book, to actually thrive as well. Austin, thanks for being here. Thanks for imparting wisdom, and be safe out there.
Thanks, G. Have a great day.
Take it easy.